Most people think closure is a conversation. They think closure is a final message, a final explanation, a final apology. A moment where the other person finally tells the truth and you finally feel peaceful. That idea keeps anxious attachment trapped for months, sometimes years, especially in avoidant dynamics. Because avoidant patterns are the least likely to give the kind of closure your nervous system is craving. They don't give clean explanations. They give distance. They give ambiguity. They give a final warm moment, followed by silence. They give mixed signals that keep your mind working. And the reason this is so painful is not only emotional, it's biological. Your brain is trying to complete an open loop. It's trying to resolve uncertainty so it can relax. So you keep looking for the missing piece. What did I do? What do they feel? Are they coming back? Did it mean anything? Was it real? That chase for an answer becomes its own bond. Not because you are weak, because your nervous system is trying to protect you from the feeling of being left in the dark. Here is the truth we're going to build this episode around. The only closure that actually works does not come from them. It comes from you. Not as a motivational slogan, as a psychological mechanism. Closure is not something you receive. Closure is something you create by changing the rules your mind is living under. And once you do that, it stops mattering whether the avoidant ever explains. It stops mattering whether they ever admit what they did. It stops mattering whether you ever get the final talk. Because the open loop closes inside you. That is real closure. Let's define what anxious attachment is really asking for when it asks for closure. It's not just asking for information, it's asking for safety. An anxious system uses information to create safety. If I understand what happened, I can prevent it from happening again. If I know why they pulled away, I can fix it. If I know what they feel, I can predict what happens next. If I get certainty, I can relax. That's why closure becomes addictive. It's not only grief, it's the urge to regain control. And avoidant patterns tend to be the worst match for this need, because their main regulation strategy is to reduce emotional exposure. When things get intense, they shut down. They go quiet. They disappear. They deflect. They give a vague reason. They say they need space. They say they're overwhelmed. They say they can't do this. They say they don't want pressure. Sometimes they mean it. Sometimes it's a cover story. But either way, it leaves the anxious system with the same result: uncertainty. And uncertainty turns your mind into a detective. You start hunting for micro signs. You interpret story views, late-night reactions, small check-ins, random messages, nostalgia, music, anything that can be used as a clue. But clues don't calm an anxious system. Clues keep it activated, because clues keep the case open. So the first thing you need to understand is what closure is not. Closure is not an explanation. Explanations can be false. Closure is not an apology. Apologies can be shallow. Closure is not them admitting they were wrong. Even if they admitted it, your nervous system could still stay stuck if you don't change the contract you're running internally. Closure is not a perfect ending. Closure is a decision that creates emotional finality. Emotional finality means you stop waiting for the missing piece. You stop using their uncertainty as your job. You stop treating their silence like a puzzle you must solve. That is the only closure that works. Now, let's talk about why avoidant dynamics specifically block closure. Avoidant patterns often create relationships where intimacy and distance alternate. You get closeness, then withdrawal. You get warmth, then silence. You get connection, then ambiguity. That pattern is not just painful, it is neurologically sticky. Intermittent reinforcement is the most powerful way to create obsession. Your brain becomes more focused when rewards are unpredictable. So you become more focused on them when they are least available. This is why you can feel calm with someone stable and feel bored, and feel obsessed with someone unstable and call it chemistry. It's not because you're irrational, it's because your nervous system is being trained by the reward schedule. Now, closure is the act of changing the reward schedule inside you. It is removing the reward of hope. Not hope as a life force, hope as a drug. The hope that says, maybe if I send the right message, I'll get the answer. Maybe if I wait, they'll come back and explain. Maybe if I show them I'm calm, they'll realize. Maybe if I keep access open, they'll return. That hope feels compassionate. It feels romantic. But psychologically, it keeps the loop open. So closure begins with one hard question. What am I actually waiting for? Most anxious people think they're waiting for truth. They're often waiting for relief. They're waiting for the feeling of being chosen again so the pain stops. They're waiting for the avoidant to return so the nervous system can exhale. But that exhale is not closure. It's a reset. Because if there is no repair and no change in behavior, the pattern will repeat. And every time it repeats, your nervous system learns a deeper lesson. I can't trust closeness. I can't trust myself. I can't trust love. That's how anxious attachment gets worse. So the only closure that works is the closure that ends the pattern, not the closure that restarts it. Let me say that again in a way your nervous system can absorb. Real closure ends the pattern. Fake closure restarts the pattern. Fake closure often comes in the form of a message that makes you feel temporarily better, or a conversation that gives you a story, or a warm reunion that doesn't include repair. It feels like resolution, but it doesn't create stability. Real closure creates a new rule. The new rule is, I do not build my life around ambiguity. I do not treat mixed signals as proof. I do not trade my stability for access. I do not reward silence with pursuit. I do not accept proximity without consequence. That rule closes the loop because it removes the incentive for your mind to keep scanning. Scanning is driven by the belief that the answer is out there. Real closure says, the answer is in the pattern. The pattern is the answer. If someone repeatedly gives you closeness and then withdrawal with no repair, you don't need their explanation to know what your nervous system experiences. Unstable. And you don't need to hate them to stop participating. Now, let's get into the core mechanism of closure. Closure is a boundary with time. It's a point where you stop allowing your mind to use the past as a negotiation. Many anxious people keep reopening the case. They replay the beginning. They replay the good moments. They replay the promises. They replay the intimacy. They replay the parts that felt real. And they use those memories as evidence that the relationship deserves more time. But memories are not a contract. Memories are not behavior. Memories are not repair. Memories are a photograph of a moment. Closure happens when you stop using photographs to predict the future. Instead, you use patterns. Patterns are the most honest form of information in relationships, because patterns show what a person can sustain, not what they can feel in a moment. So the first closure move is this. You replace the question why with the question what. Why is an endless tunnel. Why did they do it? Why did they change? Why did they pull away? Why did they say that? Avoidants often don't even know the full why themselves. Their system reacts faster than their words, so you may never get a satisfying why. The question what is grounding. What did they do? What pattern did they repeat? What happened after closeness? What happened when I expressed a need? What happened when there was conflict? What happened when I asked for clarity? That's closure. Because when you answer what honestly, you don't need to keep guessing. You've stopped negotiating with mystery. Now, the second closure move is the one that anxious attachment resists the most. You stop asking for the answer from the person who benefits from you not having it. This sounds sharp, but it's accurate. When you stay confused, you stay available. When you stay hopeful, you stay accessible. When you keep seeking closure, you keep the connection alive in some form. Many emotionally unavailable people like that because it allows them to keep proximity without full responsibility. They can leave and still feel desired. They can return without repair. They can test access. They can maintain a bond without having to maintain behavior. That's why the anxious person has to become allergic to partial returns. If someone comes back with a message that contains warmth but no accountability, your nervous system will interpret that as hope, and your mind will reopen the case. So closure requires a new standard for what counts. A real return requires behavior plus repair. A real return includes consistency after the return, not only the return itself. If those elements are missing, you treat it as a probe, not a reunion. And you do not feed probes with intimacy. You respond, if you respond, with calm, minimal energy. That's how you stop resetting the loop. Now, the third closure move is internal. You stop treating your anxiety as a message to send. Anxious attachment often sends messages to reduce discomfort. It sends the check-in text, the clarity text, the closure text. Those texts are not usually about the relationship. They are about the nervous system wanting relief. Relief is short-term. Relief is the drug. Closure is the cure. So you need a rule. When activated, delay action. Regulate first, then decide. Then ask yourself one question. If I send this, what behavior am I rewarding? If sending it rewards withdrawal with attention, don't send it. If sending it sets a clean standard without trying to control the outcome, you can send one short line. Then you stop. No follow-ups, no paragraphs, no chasing. Because the moment you start chasing, you reopen the case, and your body learns that uncertainty controls you. Now, here's the part that makes closure actually stick. You build a coherent story that does not require their cooperation. Most people think closure needs their confirmation. It doesn't. Your story can be simple and true without becoming dramatic. Here is an example of a coherent closure story. This connection had real moments, but the pattern was unstable. I wanted consistency and repair. They could not sustain it, or did not choose it. The lack of repair tells me the bond was not safe for my nervous system. I release the need for an explanation because the pattern is enough information. That story closes the loop because it answers the anxious system's deepest question. Is it my fault? The answer becomes, it is not about fault. It is about capacity and choice. Capacity means what someone can sustain. Choice means what someone repeatedly chooses. Your job is not to get them to choose you. Your job is to choose an environment your body can relax inside. Now, let's talk about the closure mistake that looks mature but keeps people stuck. The mistake is staying friends to prove you're evolved. If you can do that calmly, fine. But many anxious people use friendship as a way to keep the threat alive while telling themselves it's harmless. It's not harmless if your nervous system stays activated. If you feel spikes when they post. If you feel drops when they don't reply. If you feel hope when they react. If you feel pain when they date. That is not friendship. That is attachment in a different outfit. Closure means you stop putting your nervous system in environments that re-trigger hope. The purpose is not to punish them. The purpose is to stop bleeding. Now, if you're thinking, but what if they come back later? Here is the clean answer. The door is not closed because you hate them. The door is closed because you require a different contract. If they return with behavior plus repair, that's a new contract. If they return with the same vagueness, that's the same contract. Closure means you don't renegotiate your standards just because they reappear. The anxious system wants to lower standards when the person returns because relief feels like love. But you have to remember, relief is not a relationship. Relief is a nervous system event. A relationship is repeated behavior. Now, I want to address the part of closure that most people avoid because it's uncomfortable. Closure often means grieving the future you imagined, not just grieving the person. The imagined future is what keeps the open loop alive. You replay what it could have been. That imagined future is real to your nervous system. So closure requires letting it die. This is why closure feels like death sometimes. Because you're not only letting go of them, you're letting go of the you that was going to be chosen in that story. And that is where people sabotage closure. They keep a small pocket of hope because grief feels too final. But that pocket of hope keeps you attached. So closure is the willingness to let the fantasy end, and then build your life anyway. Not in a rushed way, in a grounded way. Now, here's a practical closure marker you can use. If you can think of them without needing them to do something, you are closing. If you can remember the good without wanting to reopen the case, you are closing. If you can see their behavior clearly without translating it into a romantic story, you are closing. If you can receive a message without your body spiraling into hope or panic, you are closing. Closure is not a thought. Closure is a nervous system state. It is when your body stops scanning. And your body stops scanning when the environment becomes predictable, or when you stop participating in unpredictability. That's it. Now, what if you never get an explanation and part of you still wants justice? That's normal. Humans want coherence. But justice does not require their confession. Justice is you refusing to pay the cost of confusion any longer. Justice is you removing access to the parts of you that are sacred. Your time, your attention, your emotional energy, your future. So, the only closure that works is a boundary that protects your nervous system and changes your reward schedule. You stop rewarding inconsistency. You stop rewarding vagueness. You stop rewarding silence with pursuit. You align access with behavior. You require repair. You require consistency. And if someone cannot meet that, you stop negotiating. That is not cold. That is stable. And stability is what anxious attachment is truly craving. Not a perfect explanation. Stability. Now, I'll leave you with one final truth that will make closure easier. You do not need them to understand you for you to move forward. You do not need them to admit it for it to be real. You do not need them to validate your pain for you to protect your life. You can love someone and still refuse the contract they offered. You can miss someone and still choose your baseline. You can want them and still choose steadiness. That is the only closure that actually works. Welcome to PsychBond. You're safe here.